Yes, Madam President.
Good morning, distinguished participants. Our distinguished moderator, a friend of Nizami Ganjavi International Center, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Tawajiri, our distinguished Secretary General, Ravshan Muradov. We all know how fairy tales start. Once upon a time, about 900 years ago, or to be precise, 880. Good morning, distinguished participants. Our distinguished moderator, a friend of Nizami Ganjavi International Center, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Tawajiri.
Just speaking.
We have a decalage in terms, I'm hearing myself speak.
Yeah, it was my mistake. I stopped it because social media was like giving an echo. And so
they have an echo.
Yeah.
So, I do not need to start again, I presume.
No need.
I continue, shall I?
Yeah.
So once upon a time, about 900 years ago, or to be precise, 880, there lived a great poet in the ancient city of Ganja, which at that time, long ago, was part of the Persian Sassanid Empire. The poet's full name has been transcribed in different ways by different authors. Jamal ad-Din Abu Muhammad Ilyas ibn Yusuf ibn Zaki is one of the versions, but everybody knew him over the centuries as Nizami Ganjavi, the poet from Ganja. That is the city where he was born. It seems that he spent his whole life there from 1141 Common Era or 535H, or rather 535H, to 1202 or 3, or some even suggest 9, but probably 1202 of the Common Era. Ganja, for those of you who haven't visited it, is a lovely city in modern-day Azerbaijan, and it is part of Azerbaijan, of course, where the ancient poet is remembered with great pride and reverence as a national poet of the nation, and this year, 2021, has been declared by His Excellency the President Ilham Aliyev as the year of Nizami Ganjavi, and a great deal of activities are going to be undertaken in the honor of this great treasure of Azerbaijani culture. And this conference, organized by the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, is one of the manifestations of this special celebration. Mr. Chairman, our moderator, I pass on the camera and the audio to you.
I'm very honored to moderate this panel, and I greet you and greet all the participants. All of them are very dear friends, and also I greet my dear friend, the Secretary General, Mr. Ravshan Muradov, for organizing this important event in the year of Nizami Ganjavi. And most thanks go to His Excellency the President of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, who designated this year to be Nizami Ganjavi's year. The speakers who are with us today are very learned and prominent personalities, and it is a great honor to introduce them one after the other. But first, we have to listen to you, Your Excellency, to give some remarks. If you wish, you can talk for some minutes to open the discussion on this great personality. And after that, we will move to give the floor to the respected participants. Each one of them will speak in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, according to the time allocated for us. And then we will wrap up this panel with the outcome of the discussion that clarifies and introduces the personality of this great philosopher, poet, and human man, Nizami Ganjavi, who is not dead. He is still living with us in the world. So, Your Excellency, take the floor for an introductory remarks, and then I will move to introduce the other participants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As said, we know, and the world knows, Nizami as a great poet, and a great poet who has maintained his fame for nearly 900 years, which is no small accomplishment. We know that he's particularly a great narrative poet, and his fame spread far and wide, both east and west, because of what is known as the Hamsa, the quintet of 5 narrative poems, also known as the Panchganj, the 5 treasures, and one of them, the Tale of the 7 Beauties, is one I'd like to tell you about a bit more in detail today, because it's one that I happen to be working on and I find it extremely exciting, and I hope that it gives you a taste for the sort of work that Nizami did. Nizami is not as well known in the Western world as his talent really deserves. And the reason is very simple. There are too few good translations of his work into modern languages, particularly Western ones. Only a few specialized scholars are able to read his works in the original Farsi and to read the script of the time. Even fewer have been able or willing to translate it, although fragments of part of his work, larger or smaller fragments, have been appearing over the last 100 years and more in English, Russian, French, and German, and probably some other languages. But as I know from experience, these are frequently editions that are extremely difficult to obtain. They're out of print, and in other words, there's a huge amount to be done by various academies and by bodies of scholars to continue with translations into Nizami's work in as many world languages, frankly, as it is possible, because I think he deserves it. The work of Nizami Ganjavi was preserved throughout nearly 9 centuries, when we know that so many authors of Greek and Roman antiquity have completely disappeared, or the majority of their work has disappeared into the various fires, lootings, destructions, ideological wars, or simply, in the case of vellum manuscripts, by literally the tooth of time, in other words, a bookworm that actually chews up if you like, the substrate on which the text is written. Now, in the case of Nizami, the manuscripts, a great many of them, had been preserved because of the fortunate circumstance that they were transcribed in absolutely beautiful calligraphy, lavishly bound, richly, superbly illustrated by what came to be known in the world as Persian miniatures, and even as the language that the poet used became more and more difficult of access to successive generations of readers, the pictorial illustrations retained their fascination and helped to have the manuscripts copied and recopied and thus preserved over the centuries, which is no small thing. Now, one of the poems that I find particularly fascinating and I'm currently working on is called The Tale of the 7 Beauties, or literally Haft Paikar, the 7 Pictures. And it was finished in 1197 of the Common Era. That is not many years before the end of Nizami's life, and it is his last major work. I have used the German translation of the Swiss scholar Rudolf Gebke, who chose to translate only the central part of what is a long poem in 3 parts, which has many tales across the world, both simple oral tales from simple cultures to complex literary edifices, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I shall be talking briefly about the middle of the poem of the Seven Beauties. Now, at the core of this poem, we have a multi-layered narrative, and there's an introductory structure which leads to 7 embedded parallel episodes. This nesting of tales, of course, is familiar to all of you and to many children from the tales of Sherazad or the 1001 Nights, if you like, the Arabic tradition of a narrative frame within which different tales in turn are told. But in this case, what is striking at the framing is very systematic. It repeats the same concept, but not the same words, so the interest is kept up for the reader. And while it has many characteristics that are similar and analogous to oral traditions, Nizami was proud of himself as a literary poet. He left his poems in writing, and it is in the sense of written literature, of course, that we have to evaluate them. I thought that it would be fun in starting the conference, and we will be talking about a lot of abstract and very weighty things, to give you a sense of the lightness, of the entertainment, of what Nizami was creating. And the introductory narrative frame of the Seven Beauties goes as follows. Shah Behram had 7 wives, and he had loved them all even before he met them. How was that possible? As a young prince, he had spent his youth in a castle of the Arab Sheikh Noman, where one day he came upon a mysterious locked room. And we have in hundreds of years of literature where mysterious locked rooms, of course, play a crucial role. The prince had it opened, and when he entered it, he discovered portraits of 7 beautiful princesses from 7 different parts of the world on the wall, and his own portrait in the middle. There was also writing in an unknown hand which stated that he should marry the 7 beauties when he came upon the throne. That was the will of God, their Lord and Creator. And it was the will of the 7 planets and their Lord and Creator. Now, there in just this one introductory sentence, we see already the spirit of openness and tolerance that permeates all of Nizami's poetry, and which is a leading concept for the creation of the modern Nizami Ganjavi International Center. While quite obviously a God-fearing man of high moral standards, one deeply concerned about the welfare, the common welfare of humanity, Nizami does not take a narrowly sectarian view of religion and of morality. He is not a Puritan by any means, but he only emphasizes the overriding role of a universal creator. The planets he refers to, that have been created by the Lord, could be considered by some as having their own will and even a godlike influence on the fates of humans. But this concept is not seen by the author Nizami as a dangerous polytheistic theory, and certainly he's not the sort of man who would ever accuse anybody of heresy and recommend that they be burned at the stake. He's a very open and tolerant man. He understands the deeper principles of what is proposed, not the superficial form. So for Nizami, the influence of the planets is simply a reflection of a hierarchy of distribution of powers, that all of them, in various ways, in various manners of expression, are expressions of the power of the Almighty, in whom all his heroes, in one sense or another, except for the bad ones, because he has a rather dualistic way of having one, even the stories of in the Haft Paikar, the heroes are called good and bad. So there is definitely a good and evil dualism in his stories. There's an interesting detail follows. After Shah Behram had prayed at the Temple of Fire on Saturday, the first one he went to visit, all dressed in black, was a princess from India in the dome of Saturn. Now, you see, one of the things about what his introductory story had told, once he came upon the throne, he should build 7 domes of 7 different colors and marry 7 princesses from 7 different parts of the then known world. Here's a second element of Nizami's tolerance, that all of these 7 princesses, the Shah loves equally. He refers to the Chinese princess as the slant-eyed beauty, but unlike the sort of Puritanism, which is making, I think, current-day contemporary America start book burning, if you like, and putting certain books of the child book author who is much beloved of children over the generations, because he had at some point referred to the Chinese, or drawn a picture of Chinese with slanted eyes. Nizami again does not do it in any derogatory way. It is simply an ordinary. The Chinese call us round-eyed, the rest of the world, and it is not seen as an offensive remark. So that he builds these 7 domes, each of a different color, and each day of the week he dresses in different color garments and goes to visit a princess from a different part of the world and asks her, each of them, to tell a tale. So on the first day of the week, which is Saturday, he starts the day by praying in the Temple of Fire. Then he was all dressed in black, and then he went to visit a princess from India in the dome of Saturn. Now, it's very obvious here that the hero of the framing story of the 7 beauties is not a Muslim like Nizami himself. He's clearly Zoroastrian. And that is confirmed at the end of the 7th tale, which is on Friday, the day he visits the white dome devoted to Venus. When Venus shines upon him, it says textually, and when in giving praise to the color white, the poet says, this is why we, Zoroastrians, dress in white when we pray. And here again, Nizami, who is known as a very devoted Muslim sage, Hakim, is absolutely free and does not feel any kind of unease in presenting a hero, a Shah of Iran, more or less a historical figure, but of course a legendary one, presenting him for what he is, and that is a Zoroastrian. For the details of the tales, I think I might briefly refer to the tale of the princess from India, which she tells on the day of Saturn. By the way, these days are exactly the same ones that were known by the Babylonians. In other words, the 5 planets that were known in antiquity already, plus a day devoted to the sun and a day devoted to the moon. This is a long tradition going all the back through the Greco-Romans and even the link to various deities. And here again, no compunction about referring to what might be called pagan deities of pre-Muslim times, because on Tuesday, the day of Mars, Behram dresses in red, goes to visit a princess from Russia, and is not the name Behram, does it not mean Mars, you see? So there's a special connection and no objection to that. But what is interesting in the stories themselves is that they have an absolutely astounding number of different levels of symbolism. First is a beautiful poetry. We cannot know, unless we know the language, how beautiful it was. I have read prose translations, and it's a narrative that is fascinating. And the narrative has exciting fairy tale elements, there are magical elements, there are supernatural creatures, the events are supernatural in many ways that happen, so that there's a fairy tale, the 1001 Nights atmosphere to the style. In addition to that, Nizami is no Puritan. He has some rather remarkable poetic passages about erotic desire and indeed about lovers uniting in their love with a series of extraordinary diverse metaphors about the act of love. But what one finds above all is that all of this is just a surface level of narrative to attract the reader or listener to the story. There's always a message, but a subtle message. He does not preach like a preacher from the pulpit. He tells you the message through the fascination of his story. And the message in the first story is of a man who, first of all, is moved by curiosity, which he tries to satisfy. And it's never enough, never enough, never enough. In trying to satisfy his curiosity, he gets into a scrape where he is left on top of a sort of tall column on a narrow platform, and a huge, mysterious, unnatural bird comes to perch there with him. When morning comes, he grabs the leg of the bird flies him to a place, drops him down into a magnificent garden and verdant prairie, which is like the image of paradise that many, even Abrahamic religions portray. But at first he is thrilled. He was in danger of death. He was desperate. He arrives in a place and he feels it is absolute paradise. But night comes and even better comes. The queen of the fairies comes with a train of extraordinary beauties, all of them bearing candles, playing sweet music, singing sweet songs, plying him with wine. By the way, Nizami's heroes are no abstainers. The Shah of the story is constantly drinking wine, and the heroes of the tales within tales also are constantly drinking wine, eating sweets. Sweets appear to be in a time something very special. And he has each night, the queen of the fairies offers him one of the beauties, builds him a special palace, magical palace, where he can enjoy her. But our hero never has enough. So the moral tale is this, that the desires, the needs of humans, where having satisfied one desire, they then feel the next, and they want the next. And the one thing that's told, wait, it's not told you can't have it, but wait, he has to wait for a full moon to come again, that has a symbolic meaning as well. And of course he is unable to do so, and therefore then has regrets all his life. And so it goes for the rest of his stories. And my conclusion from all of that is that Nizami, through these stories, is conveying a message that is truly a universal one about what it is that makes humans happy and what it is that makes them unhappy. It is very similar to Zen Buddhism or the Buddhism that the Dalai Lama preaches, or to that of any other religion. When people have desires and are never satisfied, they are bound to be unhappy. When people feel that their personal desires are more important than moral precepts or what is right or the laws of the land, then there's going to be difficulty. In his stories, at least, the bad get punished and the good have a happy end. And this is why, of course, much like fairy tales, but also, if you like, the novels of Jane Austen, they're all also fairy tales of the 19th century. You enjoy them just as much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to hearing the serious discourses from my colleagues on this distinguished panel, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to participate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Mrs. President. This is a wonderful introduction. You opened a big horizon for the speakers about this great personality. And it is my honor now and privilege to introduce my dear friend, His Excellency Mr. Ekmeleddin Ihsanoğlu, member of the Turkish Parliament and Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the former Secretary General of the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, to take the floor.
Dr.
Welcome, my friend.
He's not here? A little bit like, yeah, we can skip to the next speaker.
He's not here.
Yeah, yet.
Okay, so we will now move until we have our friend Mr. Kamaluddin. We will move now to Mrs. Goni Afendieva, the president of the International Turkic Culture and Heritage Foundation, a dear friend, and I'm very happy to see her with us in this panel. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Abdulaziz Tavijri. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am very glad to be here with you today. I am very grateful for this online conference with the purpose to once more commemorate our great Nizami Ganjavi and appreciate the efforts of Nizami Ganjavi International Center and the Turkic Academy for this organization. Nizami Ganjavi lived a life of 68 years. Nevertheless, the legacy that he led doesn't fit not only to the 68 years, but goes beyond the boundaries of the past 880 years. Therefore, Nizami is always contemporary. Our contemporary is a contemporary of all centuries. Take a look at the fact that in the 880 years, seemingly everything has already been said. Hundreds of research papers have been written and books have been published about his creative works. Yet, even nowadays, Nizamology is making new discoveries, expressing new ideas, suggesting new opinions. Centuries replace one another, political and social epochs change, and each time Nizami's literature heritage, his heritage, requires a newer, more modern, theoretical and aesthetic view. I would like to begin from Ganja, from his city. Ganja, you know, is one of the traditionally rich, ancient cultural centers, not only of Azerbaijan, but of the whole Turkic world. Nizami called Ganja the land of magicians, comparing Ganja to ancient Babylon, and called himself as skillful wizard. He presented his work as the wealth of Ganja, above everything. If another great artist had expressed such thoughts, he might be seemed far from modesty, yet we take his words very naturally because his creativity confirms these words. History has proved that his work is not only the wealth of Ganja, but also the human wealth of the whole Turkic world. During Nizami epoch, the Turkic dynasties such as Shirvanshahs and Ildigizids ruled in Middle Age Azerbaijan. He knew Pahlavi, Persian, Arabic, and according to various scholars, even Greek, and wrote in Persian, the traditional language of poetry at that time. His love for an ethnic Turkic Kipchak girl Afak was an expression of his life for the entire Turkic world. Just as in Shakespeare's works, the themes from Renaissance literature, in Nizami's Hamsa, we sometimes come across familiar themes and episodes from famous Oriental written monuments, as said Mrs. Vicky Freiberger. For example, such as 1001 Nights, Siyasetname, Gabusname, and the great Persian poet Ferdowsi Shahnameh. However, even within these familiar plots, his works remain completely original. The great Orientalist academician Bertes, in his work, Nizami and Ferdowsi, compares these two great thinkers and comes to a very simple conclusion. Nizami is Nizami, Ferdowsi is Ferdowsi. It is impossible to evaluate Nizami's work as unidimensional. Who is Nizami? Is he a romantic? Yes, he is romantic. Is he a realist? Yes, he is a realist. Is he a utopian? Yes, he is utopian. Is he a lyric or an epic poet? Being an author of more delicate ghazals, of course, he is a great lyricist. And at the same time, certainly, as an author of verse novel epics, he is a great epic poet. Nizami's creative vision does not fit into stereotypes. One of the best researchers of his work in Europe, prominent psychologist Erich Fromm, writes, Nizami is a philosopher when it comes to society, and psychologist when it comes to human. This opinion of Fromm can be significantly expanded. Nizami is an artist while describing nature, a music critic while discussing music, a doctor while talking about medicine, and so on. Nizami is a remarkable artist of the whole Turkic world, yet his work as the heritage of Homer and Dante, Yunus Emre and Ferdowsi, Cervantes and Shakespeare, Goethe and Tolstoy, does not confine itself to national borders. I would like to appeal to academician Bertels once again. He wrote in his famous monograph, The Great Azerbaijani Poet Nizami. Nizami opened a new page in the history of literature. In fact, this new page was opened in the great Turkic poetry, but at the same time, it is a new page in the poetry of the whole world. It is no coincidence that the great German poet Goethe considers Nizami one of the greatest poets of his famous work, West-East Divan. He wrote, the feeling of human love is generously described in the works of Nizami. He called Nizami a poet of all times and peoples. Another great German poet, Heinrich Heine, said with an emotional feelings, Germany has its own great poets, but who are they compared to Nizami? It is also a symptomatic phenomenon that when talking about Nizami, Goethe pays attention to the history and geography of Azerbaijan and uses the toponym Azerbaijan. Let me, yes, I think this enough about Goethe. Incidentally, not avoiding the abundance of quotations about Nizami, I would like to draw your attention to considerations written by a classic of 20th century French literature, Louis Aragon, referring to Nizami's work. He said, in the 12th century, such works of literature were created in Azerbaijan that they now form the basis of flourishing Azerbaijani literature. Azerbaijani literature is, of course, a part of the great Turkic literature. Nizami's work has played an important role in the development of literature created by the Turkic peoples since to the early Middle Ages. I would like also to remind the words of one of the most prominent representative of medieval Old Turkic classical literature, the great Uzbek poet Alisher Navai, whose 580th year anniversary we celebrated this year too. Nizami's art is so great and heavy that to measure it would be required a scale as large as the heavens, a unit as large as the earth. Nizami's work has played an exceptional role not only in the development of Azerbaijani literature and social mentality, but also in the development of Azerbaijani music, theater, cinema, fine arts, carpet weaving, sculpture, two immortal romances by Uzeyir Hacıbeyef, Garagaraev's masterpiece of 20th century world ballad, Seven Beauties, his symphonic poem, Lili and Majnun, lyrical whore, Autumn, Fikret Amirov's symphony that sounds over the world like in memory of Nizami, and the ballet Nizami written later. Niyazi's Khosrow and Shirin, Afrasiab Badalbeyli's Nizami operas, the verse of many other Azerbaijani composers as a proof of Nizami contribution to Azerbaijani music. And the president of the Republic of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev, has declared 2021 as a year of Nizami. This is a bright expression of great respect, not only for classical Azerbaijani literature, but for all Turkic literature. If a magnificent statue of Nizami with the inscription, Great Azerbaijani Poet, is erected on the pedestal in Rome, one of the European cultural centers, the center named after Nizami Ganjavi, headed by the academician Nargis Pashaeva, operates at the University of Oxford, which has the same age as Nizami. And of course, the Nizami Ganjavi International Center functions with members, prominent politicians from all over the world. This demonstrates the global magnitude of his personality. And our organization, the International Turkic Culture and Heritage Foundation, which was established by the initiative of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan and with the support of President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and the Republic of Turkey, has the purpose of carrying out activities in the direction of studying, preserving, and promoting the history, culture of the Turkic world. The foundation also celebrates anniversaries of great personalities and propagates their heritage all over the world. In this way, the foundation plans to actively participate in events dedicated to Nizami Ganjavi, publish his books in different languages, and conduct research on his remarkable heritage. And this year, of course, following the great victory achieved by Azerbaijan, this will be done with greater enthusiasm and motivation. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Afendieva, for this wonderful journey that you took us to see new and fascinating facets of the personality of Nizami Ganjavi and the history of his work and his brilliance as one of the world's prominent poets, philosophers, and intellectuals. And it is great to go in this way, so the world will know that the Islamic civilization in all parts of the Islamic world was a civilization of knowledge, of openness, of tolerance, of great humane personalities like Nizami Ganjavi and the other personalities that you have just mentioned in your speech. Thank you so much. Now we will move to our friend, Mr. Tarkan Kaidarali, President of the International Turkic Academy, who is also a co-organizer of this web conference. Please take the floor.
Thank you. Your Excellency, dear guests, distinguished conference participants, I am honored to greet you at the International Web Conference jointly organized by the International Turkic Academy and the Nizami Ganjavi International Center. I am happy to see such distinguished and world-famous people all together. The event is dedicated to the 808th anniversary of the great Azerbaijani poet and thinker Nizami Ganjavi. I also thank the leadership of the Nizami Ganjavi Center for the initiative to hold a joint conference with us. Supporting the decision of the President of Azerbaijan, the International Turkic Academy declared 2021 the year of Nizami Ganjavi in the whole Islamic and Turkic world. And we included the anniversary events and the action plan of the organization for 2021. Nizami Ganjavi has become an invaluable spiritual treasure not only of Azerbaijan and the Turkic Islamic world, but of all mankind. His works are a great treasure for the humanity. He founded a new literary school in the whole East. Hundreds of poets and writers, including Nasimi, Fuzuli, Alisher Nawai, were influenced by his works. They created great piece of literature and development Nizami's progressive ideas. According to the works of Nizami and other artists, the 12th, 16th centuries are considered the Renaissance period of Azerbaijani literature. Nizami's works are as relevant today as they were in his days. Each of the works included in the poet's Hamsa has wisdom and with that resonates with the present day. The poet promotes ideas of rights, law, humanism, a just society, and a just state. He believes that where there is no just humanity will perish. The study and promotion of his works on the global scale is one of the priorities of the International Turkic Academy. We believe that the events dedicated to the year of Nizami Ganjavi will promote dialogue, tolerance, and understanding between different people and cultures. This will be an important platform for international cooperation and contribution to a more detailed study of the great thinker's legacy. At the same time, despite the difficulties caused by the pandemic, the Turkic Academy is preparing to organize another international conference in the poets' hometown Ganja. Translators, scholars, and literary critics who have translated Nizami's works to world languages will be present at the event. Also, the Kazakh National Academic Theater, named after Kuanishbayev, staged the poets' play Leyli and Majnun in Kazakhstan. They will perform the play in Ganja and Baku as well. By the way, last year, during the 44-day patriotic war, I visited Nizami's hometown of Ganja to Armenia's rocket attacks on civilians. Unfortunately, the city was also shelled and many civilians were killed. At that time, as a delegation of the Turkic Academy, we also visited the mausoleum of the great poet in Ganja and recite prayers. We start the year of Nizami with a significant event. On December 14 last year, we signed a memorandum on cooperation with the Nizami Ganjavi International Center. This is our first joint event with the center, which promotes the ideas of the great philosopher and poet worldwide. I think that our cooperation in this direction will continue successfully. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, its leadership, and all speakers for their valuable reports. I believe that today's high-level event contribution to Nizami's legacy and its promotion. Thank you all for participants and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dakan Kaidarali. And I would like also to praise the academy that you had. It is one of the most successful institutions in the Islamic world today. And at the time of my direction of ISESCO, we had a lot of cooperation. And I wish you all the success. And I thank you for this beautiful introduction on the topic of this panel. We move now to Mr. Oli Shamiloglu, the professor in the University of Wisconsin, Madison in the United States, and also professor and chair of the Department of Kazakh Language and Turkic Studies at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. Please take the floor, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for your kind invitation to participate in this wonderful event, which is something that we really should be celebrating. I'm just going to offer a few brief remarks as a scholar of Turkic languages and cultures and as a historian of the Golden Horde to say a few words about the interest in Nizami at the court of the Golden Horde and how that created a subsequent legacy for Nizami in the Turkic speaking world, since the Khamsa of Nizami became like a classic genre in Turkic classical art literature. So as we know from the travels of Ibn Battuta, in the 1330s, the second capital of the western part of the Golden Horde, Saray Berker or Saray al-Jadid, was a cosmopolitan center of Islamic civilization. And so what we see developing at the court in the 1330s under Uzbek Khan, and then later 1341-42 under Tınıbek Khan, then under Canebek Khan, and finally under Berdibek Khan, is a synthesis, a new synthesis of Turco-Islamic or Muslim Turkic civilization, at the same time that we read that works of astronomy are being sponsored through the patronage of the Khans, works in Arabic. We get the sense that there is an interest in Persian high literature as well. And we see this through the request by Tınıbek Khan in 1341 or 1342 for somebody named Qutb to translate the Khusro-i Shirin into Turkic, into the language of the Golden Horde. And so this shows that already in this period, there was knowledge and respect for Nizami. I'm sure that there were bards who were coming, either telling or recounting the poems in Persian. Maybe there were informal translations as well, or retelling, but there was a desire on the part of the ruler to formalize this in terms of a translation. And so as a historian of the Golden Horde, I'm very interested in how this work was adapted. Clearly, it was not a word-for-word translation. There were adaptations of the text and content to fit the local environment in terms of referring to the four companions of the Prophet Muhammad, and then perhaps making them also resemble or show the importance of the four companions of the Prophet, the successors to the Prophet Muhammad, to the tribal leaders. And there were certain other local flavorings in the adaptation. But since our time is limited, I don't want to go into a deep discussion of that. So clearly in descriptions of banquets and so on, local foods that might not have been available in Ganja are emphasized. But the point is that this work, the translation of the Khusro-i Shirin, marks a new step, a new period in the rise of an Islamic Turkic literary tradition. So it is with this translation in 1341 or 1342 that we begin to see the translation of Nizami into Turkic languages. As has been mentioned, and I presume will be stated again, the Khamsa became a classic, translations and adaptations of the Khamsa became a staple of the highest levels of Turkic belletristic literature for Navai, for Fuzuli, and for others. And so it's because of the greatness of these works and the universality of the themes, as the president mentioned in the opening speech, these became staples and beloved staples of Islamic Turkic classical literature. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shamiloglu. This is also a wonderful occasion to welcome you as a prominent academic and researcher, and also a friend of us. We at Cisco had a lot of cooperation with Kazakhstan, and still it is going on. And I wish you all the success in your endeavors and in your mission.
Thank you.
Now we move to Dr. Naseem Ahmed Shah, the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences from 2014-2017, and former head of the Department of Islamic Studies at the University of Kashmir, Srinagar in India. Dr. Shah, please take the floor.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
Yes, we can see you now.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Distinguished Chairman and dear friend, Mr. Abdulaziz Tawajiri, my friend and Secretary General Dr. Roshan Barado, the dignitaries on the panel, co-chair of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, Madam Vaira, other colleagues, I am very happy to be amongst you this afternoon. I'm also grateful to NGIC for inviting me to be part of this web conference. I congratulate NGIC in particular and the whole of Azerbaijan, especially His Excellency, the President of Azerbaijan, for having declared 2021 as the year of Nizami Ganjavi. Of course, Nizami Ganjavi deserves to be the philosopher par excellence. So far as Nizami is concerned, we have found a great humanist. We have found a great philanthropist in Nizami. And when we peruse the Khamsa, when we peruse the Masnavis of Nizami, it seems that Nizami belongs to the whole universe, belongs to the whole world. The way Nizami highlights the issues that the contemporary world societies are facing nowadays, that convinces us that Nizami was thinking far, far ahead of his times. In spite of the fact that unlike his contemporaries, unlike Sadi, unlike Hafiz, Nizami did not undergo the traumas of traveling across the world. He was confined to Ganja, as we all know. He had lesser fancy to travel into the world. He himself says about his being only in Ganja, that Nizami ke dar Ganja shud shahrband, mabada je salame tu na bahrman. But in spite of being confined to Ganja only, the experiences which we see in his discourses seems to have been having a worldwide experience. And some historians also say that he was gifted by Khizr, the wisdom which we experience in his poetry. Although that cannot be a fact, but the fact remains that in spite of being confined to Ganja, Nizami speaks of a universal experience in his poetry, in his poetic discourses. And I'm myself convinced that why Nizami confined himself to Ganja only, why didn't he step out of Ganja? Perhaps the reason for that is that towards the end of Seljuk period, when Nizami emerged, almost the Persianate cultural zone was it was caught in a rift of ideological crisis. It was also caught somehow into the religious and sectarian stripes. And Nizami wanted to be quite away from those those tribes. He wanted to be quite far away from the disputes and the differences that occur in the society. He has always parted ways. He was more convinced to be away from the contemporary onslaught of ideological confusions and social tensions and strifes. I quote from Iskandarnama, himself Nizami says that I have always distanced myself from the social upheavals and uproar of the religious and the political unrest. Man az shugl giti bar afshanda dast. Man az shugl giti bar afshanda dast. Baz zanjir fiqrat shuda pai bast. Nishinam tu simur dar goshe. Deham goshra az dehan toshe. Malamat girift az man ayyam ra. Bakunje iram bardam aram ra. Dare khana ratu sipahe buland. Zadam bar jahan kufr bar khalqan. Thus, Nizami at the end emerged as a poet and an advocate of harmony, social justice, brotherhood, women's rights, religious tolerance, equality, and fair play in the statecraft. His poems greatly were nurtured by the theme of love, by the theme of love and harmony, by the theme of love and coexistence. And these themes have since been followed by all the poets across the world. Nizami brought the highest humane values and ideals into the literature of Eastern nations. And thus, he ushered in a new era of development of literary theory based on love, harmony, and peace. Therefore, his poetry, whether it is Skandarnama, whether it is Laila Majnoon, whether it is Haft Paikar, it fully reflects the preservation of human values and human dignity. Being one of the remarkable poet philosopher of his time, Nizami appeals to the society, appeals to the man that Kase dar bande mardum chuna bashad, kayo az sang mardum metarash. That human beings have fundamentally to be humane. We human beings have to fundamentally to stick to the human values. Kase dar bande mardum chuna bashad, kayo az sang mardum metarashad. How can a person be beneficial to the humanity unless and until he has a human heart within him? Similarly, in the same poem, Iskandarnama, he says, Ba mardum dar amez agar mardumi, ki ba admi hoga ras admi. Ba mardum dar amez agar mardumi, ki ba admi hoga ras admi. You be a human being and mix with the human beings and love humanity, because only human beings can love humanity. If you fail to love humanity, you fail to be a human being. You cease to be a human being. Therefore, the idea of humanism forms the basic constituent of Nizami's philosophy. Nizami carried this idea from his first verse and continued till the last poem. He himself says in Haft Paikar, E Nizami, Masihi tu dami tust, Danishe tu, Darakhti Maryami tust. He speaks of human values. Chun ratabrez in darkhat shudi, Chun ratabrez in darkhat shudi, Nek badat ke nek waqt shudi. Nizami desires man to be pious, to be thoughtful of his creator's bounties, and man becomes ultimately the focal point of Nizami's poetry. He at the same time acknowledges that human beings have always faced problems which have influenced them and their lives in several respects. Nizami is convinced that the miseries, the paradoxes, the crises in human society occur as a result of man's deviation from the right path. This deviation results in the problems of family, in the racial inequality, imbalanced ethical relationships, poverty, problems of mental and physical health, rage, struggles, social aggressions, wars, and so on. These issues are particularly mentioned and highlighted in the Nizami's poem Makhzan-e Asrar. Thus, Nizami's philosophy and his teachings address both the state of affairs in society and polity, as well as the statecraft and the good governance. The crises in the past, similar to the crisis in the present, were a threat to the lives and security of human beings, and it has caused despair, anxiety, and necessitated immediate attention, towards which Nizami points time and again in his poetry. For example, towards the menace of imbalance in the universal resources, Nizami is highly conscious that human beings should utilize the resources in the world judiciously and in a proper way. For example, Nizami says about the utilization of human resources properly. "Ze garmi wo sardi was khushkutar, sarashti ba andaze yakdigar." Oh man, you must spend all the resources, whether resources in air, whether resources in water, whether resources anywhere, these should be utilized by you in a balanced way. Chuna barkashidi wo basti nigar ki bazan nayarad khirid dar shumar. Mohandas base joyed az razishan nadanat ki chun kardi agasishan. Therefore, Nizami's poetry includes the concepts such as bafflement, meaninglessness, negligence, and self-alienation. It engenders a feeling of alienation that becomes visible through lawlessness, powerlessness, social exclusion, and self-estrangement. Human beings with such challenges and handicaps are incapable of getting involved with their dominant social organizations and will ultimately suffer identity crisis and exclusion. Nizami advises people to respect and appreciate the resources of the universe instead of damaging and destroying them. At the end, Nizami says that human beings should balance the resources of this universe. To do so, Nizami invokes the guidance from the wisdom and the knowledge. At the same time, he advocates that we must ignore the mundane world and try not to become fixated on it. Thus, humans can overcome horrible situations, combat the threats to human existence, and reinstate a just and balanced world order by using their knowledge and wisdom. Nizami maintains that individuals should avoid ignorance by developing their reasoning to its maximum through education and keeping the company of scholars and intellectuals. Nowadays, Nizami's poetry can be used in a practical manner to address the crisis in the realm of mental and emotional abnormalities. One of the central concepts of Nizami's philosophy is identifying one's weaknesses and strengths, psychological and spiritual needs and demands. And by obtaining certain skills, one can avert such crises. Nizami therefore focuses on attaining certain important skills, such as self-awareness, empathy, impersonal relationships, effective communication, stress management, management of emotions, problem solving, decision making, creative and critical. As such, Nizami contended that there are inherent capacities and capabilities present in the human being. through which one can achieve happiness and realize a sense of purposefulness in this universe. To achieve this, Nizami emphasizes that human beings utilize the universe and life not to destroy and waste it, but utilize it properly. To conclude, it would be appropriate to say that the contemporary world again needs a Nizami, or contemporary world needs to revisit and to revive the teachings and the philosophy of Nizami. Because our crisis is nowadays, the crisis of humanity. And it is Nizami only who 800 years back highlighted the crisis of humanity. And this world, which is swamped by materialism, and that it demonstrates in handling all the issues across the globe nowadays, especially the COVID-19 pandemic issue, and a world that is torn apart by imbalances, by terror, and by intolerance. We must again visit the 800 years old soul-striving wine of love and ethics, the message of Nizami Ganjavi, the message of love, the message of peace, the message of spirituality and ethics that needs to be re-emphasized and reiterated to inspire a world that is shattered by great cultural polarizations, ideological disagreements, hatred, and intolerance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasim Ahmad Shah, for this illuminating presentation on this great poet, philosopher, and humanist, Nizami Ganjavi. We learned a lot from your presentation, as we learned also from the previous presentations. Now it's my honor to welcome our friend, Mr. Nizamuddin Mohammedov, who has just joined us. He is the director of the Institute of Literature, Languages, and Folklore of the National Academy of Sciences of Uzbekistan. The floor is yours, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, hurmatli anjumanimiz raisi Abdulaziz Muallim. Bugungi bu anjuman ishtirokchilarini barchasini astoydil tabriklayman. Nizami Ganjavi va Navoiy o'rtasidagi ijodi o'rtasidagi munosabatlar bir-biriga ta'sir qilishlar benihoya boy tarixga ega. Ulug' ozar shoiri Nizami Ganjavi ijodi nafaqat Ozarbayjonda yoki Eronda yoki Farsi she'riyatda, balki jahon xalqlari adabiyotida ham alohida mavqe egallaydi. Farsi tilda mahorat bilan qalam tebratgan bu ulug' zot zamona hamsanavistlar sardori, so'z san'ati sehrgari o'laroq Sharq adabiyoti, xususan Sharq eposining 12-asrdan keyingi misli ko'rilmagan rivoji, yorqin taraqqiyotini ham belgilab bergan desak xato bo'lmaydi. Shu ma'noda Alisher Navoiy fenomenining adabiyot maydoniga chiqishi va so'z ummonidan g'avvos kabi gavharu durlar terishida shubhasiz Nizami Ganjavi yaratgan ijod xazinasining o'rni beqiyosdir. Navoiy o'zining xamsasi tarkibidagi har bir dostonning kirish qismida Nizomiy va uning 5 ganjini katta hurmat va samimiyat bilan tilga oladi. Xususan Hayratul Abrorning 12-bobi, Farhod va Shirin dostonining 5-bobi, Layli va Majnunning 5-bobi, Sabai Sayyor asarining 6-bobi, Sabri Iskandariy dostonining 6 va 7-boblari bevosita Nizomiy Ganjaviga bag'ishlangan. Alisher Navoiy Nizomiy 5 ganjini ta'rif va tafsir qilar ekan, uning oliy matlabi xamsasanj, ya'ni xamsanavistlik ekanini e'tirof etadi. Mutafakkir shoirning yozishicha, Nizomiy asari shunchaki 5lik xamsa emas, balki 5 xazinadir. Ya'ni fikrati mezoni bo'lib xamsasanj, xamsa dema balki degil 5 ganj. Alisher Navoiyning Hayratul Abror dostonidagi Nizomiyga bag'ishlangan bobga Hazrati Shayx Nizomiy Mahkim nazm mulkida zo'r bozu sar panjasi bilan 5 ganj nuqudi javohirini oldi deya sarlavha qo'yilgan. Farhod va Shirin dostonida esa ulug' shoir bu maydon ichida turmoq, ya'ni muazzam xamsachilik maydonida turmoq, qadr topmoq hurmat, e'tiborga, e'tirofga loyiq bo'lmoq oson ish emasligini aytar ekan, nizomiy panjasiga panja urmoqni go'yoki sherning panjasiga panja urishga qo'shitadi. Agar sher kabi qudratga ega bo'la olmasa ham bir palang yo'lbars singari uning yonida tura olishiga umid qiladi. Ya'ni Navoiy yozadi, kerak sher oldida sheri jangi, agar sher o'lmasa bore palangi. Doston muqaddimasida Alisher Navoiy Nizomiy Panjganjining ovozasi, shuhrati butun Fors diyorini zabt etganiga alohida e'tibor qaratadi. Ya'ni Nizomiy olsa barda birla ganja, qadim Rum ahliga ham qilsa ranja, deydi shoir. Tarixdan ma'lumki, qadimgi Rum imperiyasi dunyoning 4dan 3 qismini o'z hukmronligi ostida birlashtirgan. Bu esa Nizomiy Panjganji shuhratu ovozasining nechog'lik yuksakligini, uning tarqalishi, ya'ni jug'rofiy miqyosini ham ko'rsatib berishga harakat qiladi. Boshqa dostonlardan farqli o'laroq, Layla va Majnun dostonining asosiy g'oyasi ham, qahramonlari ham, syujeti ham Nizomiyda qanday bo'lsa, uning izdoshlari Xusrav Dehlaviy, Jomiy, Navoiy, Fuzuli va boshqalarda ham shundaydir. To'g'ri, bu qissani har qaysi san'atkor o'zi yashagan tarixiy sharoitdan kelib chiqib, o'z individual uslubi va shoirlik temperamenti bilan kuylagan. Biroq aynan Layla va Majnun haqidagi dostonlarda Nizami Ganjavi badiiy mahoratining kuchli ta'siri yanada bo'rtib ko'ringan. Xullas, Sharq mumtoz adabiyoti tarixida Nizami Ganjavi nomi bilan chambarchas bog'langan xamsachilik an'anasi Fors tojik adabiyotida Xusrav Dehlaviy, Abdurahmon Jomiylar tomonidan mahorat bilan davom ettirilgan bo'lsa, turkiy she'riyatda Alisher Navoiy bu an'anani haddi a'losiga yetkazdi. Garchi Alisher Navoiy xamsasidagi har bir doston g'oyaviy badiiy jihatdan mutlaqo yangi va o'ziga xos asarlar sanalsa-da, ular mazmun e'tibori bilan Nizomiy Panjganjidan oziqlangan. Shu sababli buyuk mutafakkir Alisher Navoiy xamsasida shoirning Nizomiy Ganjaviyga bo'lgan cheksiz muhabbati, shogirdlik ehtiromi, e'tirofu e'tibori, ko'tarinki ruh, o'zgacha zavq bilan ifodalangan. Men Nizomiy Ganjaviyni bugungi anjumanning ishtirokchilarini barchasini qutlug' sanani nishonlanayotgani bilan tabriklayman. Hammaga ijodiy, ilmiy muvaffaqiyatlar tilayman. Rahmat e'tiborlaringiz uchun.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohamedov, for this participation in this panel. I wish I could have understood the beautiful language you speak, but there is no translation.
Dr. Abdulaziz, there is a translator, and the professor just went on without letting translator, but translator is going to wrap up, like, short description.
Very good. This is wonderful. Thank you. So we'll let the translator give us, a wrapping of this introduction.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. The translator may take the floor.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I mean, the translator, is he going to speak now or when?
Hello. Who is translating? Dr. Roshan, who is translating?
Who is translating?
Ismail Gulam, but we can't hear him.
Sure.
Okay. So we'll just move to the next step in our panel, if you may, if you allow me, or shall we wait for this translator?
Otherwise, I can send also translation, which I have it because
okay,
I want.
No problem. So then we will just. I'd like to present or to throw in front of all these respectable personalities a question. Nizami Ganjavi is a great poet and a great humanist, a hakim. He's a sage, and he benefited his time, and his work is still among our people today. Is his work confined to, or can we also make use of this huge heritage in our world today, which is plagued by extremism, hatred, nationalism, and terrorism, and the world is suffering from wars and animosities. So can we bring the work of Nizami Ganjavi to the world so they may benefit from this great heritage, this great cultural and intellectual heritage, to find solution for some of our world's problems. I think this can be done in the universities, in the cultural forums, in the media, also in different social, aspects. So this question is left to the honorable ladies and gentlemen who are present with us in this panel. Who is volunteering to speak?
Dr. Tawajiri.
Yes, sir.
Right. Perhaps last part of my presentation was about the same thing, that we should revisit the message that Nizami Ganjavi has given us if we want to resolve the issues that we are facing nowadays. For example, the issue of sustainability, the issue of utilizing the resources properly. If we see Iskandar-Nama or Haft Paikar, only this morning I was perusing the verses of Haft Paikar. Lots of things have been told by Nizami about the protection of the environment, about the conservation of ecology, about the judicious use of resources. And not to talk of the peace and harmony and coexistence. The whole Khamsa is full with the message of harmony, peace, brotherhood, fellow feeling, humanity, human values, ethics. The whole Khamsa is the manifestation of the issues the contemporary world is facing. And I believe so that we should introduce Nizami in all our universities. We should start studying Nizami with its translations in the major world languages, so that Nizami's message can reach to the whole world. And I'm convinced, like all my fellow speakers, brothers here and sisters, that Nizami's message is absolutely relevant even today. The only thing that we have to do, we have to highlight it, and we have to put ourselves into working out the relevance of Nizami and his message. That we leave to the Nizami Ganjavi International Center under your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I listened to your introduction very carefully, and you mentioned that, of course. But now I would like also that this year, the year of Nizami Ganjavi, or Nizami Ganjavi, to be utilized properly. I know that Azerbaijan is keen on that, and our center is also very active in portraying the personality and the works of this great poet and sage. But unfortunately, under this atmosphere of coronavirus and the lack of meeting and the lack of the ability to convene conferences as we used to do in different parts of the world, I think this will hinder our work. But this doesn't cause us, a pessimism that stops us from working. I know that my dear friend, the Secretary General and his colleagues in the center are going to organize more and more of activities on Nizami Ganjavi in his year, 2021. And the president of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Hamayev, is very concerned about this. And we are all concerned like him, because we want to show the world that we have in our history personalities who contributed to human civilization, who contributed to the message of peace, of tolerance, of humanism, before many others who are now being raised in lofty places in the West, as if the West is the producer of tolerance and peace and humanism. No, we came before them in the Islamic world, in the Islamic civilization, and they did also their best. I mean, I'm not diminishing their work and their contribution, but we have to give our pioneers what they deserve in this time, to show that they were precedent in their work. They contributed to human civilization, and we can benefit a lot from their works. If you may allow me now to say that Nizami Ganjavi was a great poet, and great poets, recognized him as a great poet. Like Hafiz Shirazi and Sadi Shirazi and Abdurrahman al-Jami and Ismat al-Bukhari, all of them praised his poetry. And many Arab poets praised him, like Ahmed Shawqi and many other great poets in the Arab world. And also the writers of the history of personalities in the Islamic world mentioned him with great respect, like Awfi, Hamdallah al-Mustawfi, Dol Shah Samarkandi, Lutf Ali Bek. They all wrote about him with great reverence, with respect. So we have to show this to the world, not only to the world, but first to our people in the Islamic world, because there are many people who do not know Nizami Ganjavi. They don't know even Shirazi and Hafiz, and they do not know Abu al-Ala al-Ma'arri, then they don't know all the great, poets and
Abu Latahiyya, Bashar bin Burd, so many.
A great philosopher, a great educator, and these are the responsibilities of our intellectuals in the Islamic world and the concerned institutions, especially the OIC, ISESCO, and other institutions, to work hard to introduce, the bright face of the Islamic civilization, which are being now attacked by ignorance and which are being diminished and tarnished by close-minded people. So with this, I close this session, and I thank all the participants, the co-chair, our wonderful former president of Latvia, and the other gentlemen who participated. And I thank also our Secretary General, Mr. Roshan Muradov and his colleagues in the center. I am very proud to be part of the international Nizami Ganjavi International Center and to be participant always in its activities. It is one of the best forums in our world today, not only in the Islamic world, but in the world, because it is vibrant, active, present in all these situations. And this is because of the dedication of its secretariat and also because of the great support of the president of Azerbaijan and the first lady of Azerbaijan, the vice president, Mrs. Mehraban Aliyeva. I thank you all, and I'm looking forward to meeting you personally very soon, because I am really in dear thirst for a personal meeting with all my friends. And this coronavirus have, punished us severely in the last year, and it is still going on with us. But I am very optimistic that it will go away and we will come back to normalcy very soon. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm hoping to see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.